Graham O'Brien, played by Bradley Walsh, was one of the first three companions to the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker. His fellow companions being Yasmin Khan and Ryan Sinclair, announced in October 2017. Bradley Walsh is notably the most famous out of the three, so it's no coincidence this conspiracy surrounds him. Being best known as a comedian and presenter, this abandoned twist would have seen him take a dark turn in his career. Over the course of his appearances in Doctor Who, from 2018 to 2022, there are some rather alarming hints towards what could have been Doctor Who's biggest twist in its 60-year history, and here's a spookily compelling evidence to prove Bradley Walsh was the Doctor. Bradley Walsh really being a Doctor would have been one of the most shocking things ever done on Doctor Who, making it so unbelievable at first. But after this unnerving evidence is dissected, the conspiracy soon begins to sound more like fact than frightening fiction. To discover where this first come to be, we need to look deeply into where this all began, and with extensive research it has been uncovered. This wasn't no story arc birthed later on in the Chibnall era like Phasmin. No, this began at the very beginning. So early on, the foundations of this era could well have been built on this, and it seems like they were. An interview with Bradley Walsh himself proves this could have been always the intention for his character. But don't take my word for it. Listen closely and see for yourself.
So I get a phone call, it's always a phone call, isn't it? And they go, Brad, we want you to do a job. It's like the mafia. And I go, oh, okay, what's the job then? We can't tell you what it is. And I went, I can't do the job then, can I? And they said, time travel. I go, oh, okay, time travel. I said, you know that doesn't exist, you know? And he went, Doctor Who. I went, you are joking. He said, no. I said, well, lads, well, I'm flattered.
For Brad, it was a chance to live out a childhood fantasy.
A childhood fantasy? Perhaps Chris Chibnall knew this all along, and it started there. What else would bring in higher viewing figures than finding out Bradley Walsh would be playing a version of the Doctor to replace the current? This must have been discussed at some point, otherwise what else would make Bradley Walsh think he was going to be the Doctor? What makes this even more eerie and believable is that he was the only actor to not have to audition. Very suspiciously abnormal. As was with the Timeless Child story arc, which interlinks with this theory, Bradley Walsh being the Doctor was a slow burner. Small references like the Timeless Child, with more coming to light in the following series. One of the first hints in the show for the audience to pick up on was in Fugitive of the Judoon, fittingly containing a Doctor in disguise, with small hints throughout the episode. This episode saw the return of Captain Jack in search for the Doctor, trying to scoop them to give them a deadly warning. So why did the system scoop Graham? An accident because Jack thought the Doctor was still male? Not completely. If that was so, then why when he tried to scoop a female the second time, did he end up scooping both Ryan and Yaz? When the system tried to scoop the Doctor the first time, it only picked up one, Graham, because it knew exactly who to go for. Ryan and Yaz were scooped together after, as the system was confused, seeing as it already scooped the Doctor. After all, Yaz is female, and Ryan is a male, so if the system can correctly identify the right gender the first time, why else would it have issues the second time? The most well-noted piece of evidence discussed by viewers immediately after the broadcast, even making news headlines, was when Graham almost completely revealed his true self, half admitting he is the Doctor.
You are really strange.
Excuse me, I'm the most normal bloke you're ever going to meet.
Just another one of those filming mistakes? Absolutely not. This isn't Doctor Who in the 60s, where actors would fluff their lines and only had one shot, and there is no way this wasn't noticed by the crew. How could they risk airing such an accidental major confession if it wasn't part of the plan all along? You can't deny the evidence when his character half gives himself away. The mysterious question is, why was it never followed through? This enigma only turns darker the deeper you dig. Graham's Doctor is no good Doctor, unlike the incarnation he's travelling with, but similar to the Valeyard. Instead, filled with anger and rage, his protector Grace was murdered during his time as the Chameleon Arch. This imprinted onto him throughout his time as a human and turned his true self on the inside into a cold-hearted monster. It is the only explanation for his sick actions that follow. The proof of this, once again, is subtly hidden in the series finale, the Battle of Ranskor Av Kolos. Look closely at Graham only, the moment Tim Shaw viciously slaughters Powtraki's crew member.
Powtraki, don't go back. Don't worry about us. You go away,
See his obvious pleasure he gets from her execution, the way he smiles behind his rightfully disturbed team. What possible reason would she have for smiling that Tim Shaw, the murderer of his protector, just massacred again? He looks down in sadness in the next shot, but only because his future self was watching him. Perhaps she was no protector at all. If his doctor was evil all along, then maybe she was his guard. And now she was dead. Was he finally set free? Let's hope not. Otherwise the only justification for his heinous act disappears, and with it, the only bit of hope his doctor can be changed. This is no doctor we know. Now we have seen the evidence on why he is a doctor in disguise, and a cruel one at that. It is time to work out what the remaining plans of his doctor was, and why it was never revealed. Several factors changed the way things were originally going to pan out. Remember Chibnall's 5-year plan? Whatever happened to that? The change of plan for Graham's reveal happened somewhere between Revolution of the Daleks and the Flux. How do we know? If you Google the BBC Writers' Room Revolution of the Daleks script, you can see a huge cliffhanger was scrapped, but somehow still made it to the final script. Here I have circled what was meant to happen. Jack rushes in breathless. What was so urgent, and why did it not make the broadcast? Was it because of the controversy that re-emerged about John Barrowman's behaviour in the first series of Doctor Who? No. These re-emerged in April 2021, and the episode aired in January of the same year, 3 months before. So why else was it axed? After careful contemplation, the only logical explanation that matches both why it was cut and what it was involving was the scrapped cliffhanger of Graham's true identity coming to light. It is most likely this scene was filmed, but what made Chibnall do such a U-turn? Perhaps it has to do with the backlash of the Timeless Child, seeing as this is one of the most controversial ideas in the whole of New Who. It is no coincidence Graham half admitting he is the Doctor happened at the same time as the Timeless Child story arc. Was Graham another version of the Doctor, linked in with the Timeless Child like the Fugitive Doctor was? Was the uproar from fans enough for the BBC to decide with Chibnall another twist like Bradley Walsh being a Doctor all along too much for viewers, therefore making the idea vanish forever? Was it just a coincidence Jack specifically, the one who scooped Graham, with the system recognising him as a Doctor, comes bursting in breathless, with what we can only presume was another frightening warning for the Doctor? No. The original plan must have been for this to be the moment it discovered in their next series who Graham really is. Luckily for Chibnall, with a 10-month gap between the Timeless Children and Revolution of the Daleks, it gave him enough time to cut the cliffhanger and hope it is all forgotten, never to be unearthed again. Not only that, but Chibnall in this instance also got lucky that his original plans for Series 13 were scrapped due to the pandemic, giving him time to rewrite his plans for Graham's reveal. He's been very keen on not revealing what his plans for Series 13 originally were, and this is no coincidence. We know he planned to have the Sea Devils in Series 13 before the Flux idea, but aside from that, he has been very discreet with the rest of his plans. One of the only other pieces of information he was willing to share was that most of his plans did end up in the Flux series, which includes more clues to Graham's identity and companion. By the beginning of the original Series 13, we would have most likely known now who Graham was, but that doesn't mean the mystery would have stopped there. A rather unusual line picked up by fans from Graham's replacement, Dan Lewis, played by John Bishop, in the first episode proves there was still more to be revealed. Dan's first reaction to the TARDIS was not a shock. He was very calm, like this wasn't his first time he'd seen one, and indeed, it turns out it wasn't going to be. You could argue with him being abducted by an alien dog on Halloween and being transported to space was enough for him to take it in his stride, but this is very unlikely. Take Martha, for example. She clocks in. Rain begins to rise around her place of work. She and the entire hospital ends up on the moon. Rhinos in black leather come marching in, with an old woman sucking people's blood through a straw, being kissed by a handsome alien, which eventually then ends up with her almost dying from oxygen starvation, and then is shown the TARDIS. And her reaction? Like most other companions, complete shock and awe, but Dan, nothing at all. Not only this, but what he says also helps explain his lax attitudes to the TARDIS. I had a mate who had one of these. I think his was a bit bigger. Not only is it weird that he jokingly says he knows someone who had a TARDIS, but notably he also says he. Does he mean his original Doctor, Graham? Why was this line kept in if the idea had been scrapped by now? It can only be presumed this was another plan for Series 13 that was scrapped but decided to be kept in. A line which was meant to have significant meaning must have been kept in as a joke, which is what Chibnall Hope fans would think it is, considering Dan's and John Bishop's personality. Again, this isn't the only unusual evidence which proves Dan is really Graham's companion and not 13's. Like Bradley, John was the first choice for Chris Chibnall to play Dan, which was part of Chibnall's master plan. Both Bradley and John are known to be friends, as John was quizzing Bradley on Doctor Who before his announcement. This must have been part of the plan, as Chibnall would have known they had great chemistry off-screen, which have reflected well on-screen, and why John was Chibnall's first choice, as Chibnall knows the importance of good chemistry between a Doctor and companion. Strangely as well, Dan and Graham seem to know each other despite never interacted on screen. How did they meet? When did they meet? And why? All of these would have been answered if it wasn't for the axing of both the ending of Revolution of the Daleks cliffhanger and Series 13's original plans. The question is, why would Graham have been a Doctor and an evil one at that? Why was he hiding as a human? Why did he nearly reveal his identity? And how if he was under the Chameleon Archer's spell? Why was Dan his companion and not his protector from the start? Was Grace his guard or protector? Did her death set him free or turn him evil? How would this story arc been developed with Graham most likely absent from the original Series 13? And how would the 13th Doctor react to this, knowing one of her companions is really her from her lost past? Perhaps it would have sent her to a dark place, like what happened to Graham, showing us a side to 13 we'd never seen before, her Time Lord victorious moment. Now all that remains is undeniable hints, questions, and parts of the build-up of the reveal that have now been permanently erased and rewritten forever. Who really was Graham, and what was his intentions? It's a chilling mystery if you think about it. Graham isn't this sweet, funny older man who we know him to be, rather a callous fake who only showed his true colours when he wanted to kill Tim Shaw and took pleasure from the slaughter of an innocent individual. How did the Doctor not spot this imposter after all that time? And if Graham's Doctor got his way, what would have happened to our Doctor? It would have been the end of the Doctor as we know them. Maybe it was best it never turned out the way it was meant to, otherwise who knows what chaos there would have been. Never mind the flux. This Doctor would have been unmeasurably more lethal than anything we'd ever seen before, or ever would again.